few words about COVID-19 and how it has affected Italy. As you know, Italy was the first European country to be hit, to be severely affected by the spread of the virus. The first serious outbreaks happened in Italy. How we reacted. First of all, I mean, isolating the areas where the outbreak started, the two small clusters at the beginning, Codogno and Boioganeo in Lombardy and in Veneto, then extending the lockdown area to those regions, Lombardia, Veneto, and finally to the country, to the whole of the country. The toll that we have paid, are still paying, is quite high in terms of people who lost their lives, in terms of also the economy. But we can say that, first of all, the way that the Italian people reacted was commendable all over the country, and also by this gradual but quite steady, way of putting areas until the whole country in lockdown has worked to the point that we managed to contain, the spread of the virus in those areas where actually it started. From an economic point of view, well, again, the impact on the economy of the country has been, as in all other countries, every other country, is quite heavy. The Bank of Italy forecast the GDP to fall by 9%, 9.2% in 2020. What the government has been doing, of course, two main pillars, resilience and recovery. At least three main decisions, three main degrees were taken. First of all, to support the healthcare system and, of course, those who were unemployed or were losing their job. Then support to small and medium enterprises, the progressively, the medium and then the large enterprises. And finally, with the recovery package of 55 billion euros to start, the recovery phase, which is where we are now. The country, the economy is basically open again. All activities are allowed in the country. Of course, always respecting social distancing, all the measures that are necessary, because this is the message that we keep on telling our people. Situation is getting better, is improving, but there is no room for complacency. The virus is still there, and then if we lower our tension, then we can experience again, a peak and then a difficult time. So far, Italian people have, as I say, they've reacted, even the last few days, of course, with some exception, but they've acted in a very responsible way. So what do we have in front of us in terms of also of recovery? Of course, we will be, and we are based on some strength point. Let me say, first of all, that a specific task force was created and chaired by the former Vodafone CEO, Vittorio Colau, and then they completed their job just a few days ago, I should say, and then they presented to the government a very elaborated master plan, very elaborated one, with all possible policies that could be adopted by the government. Of course, then it is for the government to decide. So I'll say we will be, of course, relying on our strength points, those who also have been proved once again during these difficult times. First of all, and I was already mentioning before, a general resilience of the Italian people. The flexibility of our manufacturing sector has been a big factor. If you think that the very swift, rapid recovery that the sector had after the 2011-2012 debt crisis, to the point that now we have had for quite a few years a balance of payment in surplus. The real and financial wealth of Italian household is very high, and their level of indebtedness is among the lowest in the advanced economies. And then the how can I say, the network infrastructure has held up well, to the point that, you know, students, people, workers could do their activities to operate also in remote. So where do we have to focus now? We have to focus on, of course, there are many priorities, but I would identify at least 3 or 4 of them. First of all, public administration and the justice system. It needs to be more efficient. It needs to be faster, quicker in their decision making. That is, it has been, and it is a priority for the country. Sometimes, you know, we are in the public administration working to the point that, you know, can really help business, can really help people, you know, to do their job. The second, of course, is innovation, digitalization, and innovation in infrastructure, innovation in improving the, you know, the capital, the human capital, innovation also in science and in research. And then third, you know, the protection and then of our historic cultural heritage. All these with, how can I say, a sort of green flavor. Italy is already doing well in terms of green economy, but a further push can be done, and this is one of the priorities of my government. So these are the areas where we'll be working on in the next few months, in the next few years, taking advantage, of course, of all the measures and the envelopes, financial envelopes that have been now approved by the government, but also, I have to say, taking advantage of what the European Union and I want to spend has been doing and has been promoting. And I want to spend a few words actually on the European Union, because quite often in the last few years, the European Union, sometimes for good reasons, has been criticized for acting sometimes too little, for doing too little, and too late. Well, in this case, I have to say that the European response seems to be up to the challenge, not only in terms of the amount of the resources that have been agreed, in terms of the variety of institutions and then instruments that have been involved. All the institutions, not only the Commission, the EU Commission, but the Parliament, of course, the European Council, therefore the member states, but very important role of the European Central Bank or the European Investment Bank. I mean, all the institutions have given their contribution. So what we have now is a big envelope. The other important point is that is a high percentage of grants, because otherwise, you know, countries with a high level of debt, public debt, would find them difficult, you know, to cope in the next few years with very few conditionality. Maybe the main ones are those sort of commitments to invest in those areas I was already describing before: the green economy, the digitalization, the education, and also for once a relatively speed in the decision making. Could have been even faster, even speed than that. But compared to, as I said, previous experiences, it is a big improvement. So, as I said, European Union, there's still things to do. There is still challenges. Not all the package has been approved, especially the recovery fund, as you may know, it still needs the approval of the European Council. Some countries have different approach. Also, the decision was relatively, I would say, speedy, quick. We cannot wait for too long. So the front loading, or at least part of the package, is an important element. So in this context, new context, let me now move to the relationship between Italy and the UK. There is one thing, sorry, I forgot. I think it's important to say. When I was saying that Italy is open also for travelers, for tourists, also for those coming from the UK. Since the 3rd of June, people traveling from the UK, as well as, of course, from the European Union countries and from Schengen countries, can freely come to my country and enjoy, their time as they always do in Italy. And we do hope that when in the next few days the UK government announces the list of countries that eventually will be exonerated from the quarantine, we do hope that Italy will be one of those. Now, going back now to the what is also already part of the bilateral relation between Italy and the UK. But, Mr. Chairman, you already said some of the important elements of the bilateral relationship between Italy and the UK. You quite rightly so mentioned the trade, a very positive trade. Of course, the impact of the COVID-19 has been felt also in the bilateral trade. In the first four months of the year, there's been a fall of degrees of 21% compared to the same period of last year. The people to people relationship, very important. You mentioned the large number of the Italian community in the UK. Actually, what we estimate is that this number can go up to 700,000, the Italians living in the UK. Those who are actually we know because they are registered at the two consulates we have in London and in Edinburgh are now more than 400,000, well over 400,000. But we estimate that there is a lot more, of Italians living in the UK, as it is also reflected in the number of those who already have applied and registered for the EU settlement scheme. Important, the number of students, 14,000 last year, as you rightly mentioned. And let me say that there's one concern we have there, that when next year Italian students, as any other European country, will have to pay the international fee for the university, I fear that this could have an impact on that number. I hope not, and that would be, I have to say, I would be ashamed if I can say that, because you start the relationship when you are young, and then that bond will never disappear. And that's been one of the strengths of the relationship between our two countries. And then the international agenda, where there is so much in common between our two countries, and especially in next year, in 2021, where we will co-host the COP26, which was due to happen this year, but because of the COVID-19, we decided, of course, UK and Italian government to postpone and to have it next year. And next year also, we will have the UK, the presidency of the G7, and Italy, the G20 presidency. So there is a lot that we can do together in, as I say, especially in those three different contexts. If I want to put together, the challenges that we have together, but also the opportunities, I would focus on short-term, medium-term, and long-term challenges. In the short term, of course, the priority will be again the pandemic and what we can do together bilaterally, but also, as I said, in the G20 and the G7, and generally speaking, international level. The search for vaccine will be, of course, one of the priorities. The UK was, as I said so far, a leading role, very important. The conference that was virtually, I say, held in the UK at the beginning of June, where many countries, including mine, made an important pledge to support, the scientific search for work for a vaccine, but also therapies is important. Finding new and more effective therapies. We do have, so it's a big, I open big parenthesis. We do organize here at the embassy now, of course, online, a series of events which we call Italy Restart. And we have the two specific now events, one actually on the vaccine, the other one actually on therapies. So that will be, in the short term, the main priority. In the medium term, of course, is the economic, the sustainable, I would say, economic recovery. And again, if you think what the UK government is planning, what we are planning, there is basically the same agenda, a knowledge economy, a green economy, and a stronger health system. And again, all these objectives can be achieved only if we cooperate bilaterally, but internationally. And that's again part of the task that we have internationally. As far as Italy is concerned, we haven't yet announced, our program for G20, but I can say that the plan will be articulated on 4 Ps, people, prosperity, planet, and public health. Again, the priorities I was describing before. In the long term, we have probably the toughest, if I can say, challenge, and it's how we work together to uphold or strengthen a rule-based international order. How together we work in a way that we reboot, people trust, people's confidence in the multilateral system, in multilateralism. How we work in a way that international institutions, and of course, not only G7, G20, but the UN, how these international institutions, again, have a role which is recognized and which actually is felt by people as a positive one. Of course, WTO, WHO, they need probably some updating, but I don't think there is any way that we could do without. There is no reason, to question the importance of these international institution. And of course, NATO, all the more since the UK is leading the European, or actually it's already left now, the European Union, and there is no extension, as we know, of the transition period. All the more, we must rely on cooperation within NATO. We know that the UK is not sure, at least no intention, let's say, to pursue an agreement with the EU on foreign policy and security. We regret, but of course, we respect their decision. But it does not mean that we cannot cooperate in other international organizations such as NATO, but especially in some areas where we do have, as I was saying at the beginning, shared interests. I'm talking about Libya, I'm talking about Syria, Yemen, Iran, the Western Balkans. The role that we both have played within, till the UK was part of the European Union, to make sure that the European Union had a very positive attitude towards that area, which is so important. Sometimes we forget how important, how critical the situation was in that area only 20 years ago, and how important the role that we both play to make sure that the countries that belong to the area would be getting closer and closer to the European Union and Africa as a whole. I mean, it will be one of our priorities, not only in G20, but also for COP 2026. We are planning to have a specific event on Africa and with African countries, as I say, in the framework of the COP 26 year of events. How are we working bilaterally to foster, to promote this agenda and the role of the two countries and the cooperation of two countries in the areas, in the countries I was mentioning before. We have already two important dialogues, a structured dialogues on defense and a strategic dialogue on foreign issues. So the Ministry of Defense or Secretary of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's that the dialogues are sort of civil service, high profile civil servants. What we are planning or we are working on is to upgrade these two dialogues. And that was what the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson himself, actually, he suggested when he met at the beginning of February, just before, all this difficult time we are living. When he met, I was saying, at the beginning of February, the Italian Prime Minister here in London, when actually the COP 26 was the official launch, let's say, of the two countries co-hosting the COP 26. It is important that we work together. It is important, especially in this changing world where we are, where there is a new competition coming between big powers, and countries like Italy and the UK have all the interest in not only working together, but as I say, making the best out of occasions like the presidency of G20 and G7. And once again, I said on supporting the role of international organization. One last thing, we are of course very interested in the UK new integrated strategy review. Been following quite closely all the work behind this new strategy, where the UK is going, where Italy, what role Italy will have in the new strategy. And as I said many times, I do think that we can have a role. I do think that we have so many shared interests that only by working together we can support those interests. A different issue, of course, is the EU-UK relationships and the negotiations that are going on. But if you agree, Mr. Chairman, I would stop here, and perhaps in the Q&A session, we may, if there is any interest or any scope for that, also touch upon this specific area. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you very much for that in-depth, wide-ranging overview of bilateral and multilateral view of where our two countries can work together. Can I now go over to Lord Taylor for a talk, which is for 5 minutes, before we go for a talk by Mark Longy, Member of Parliament, and the Q&A chat by Melissa. So can I go over to Lord Taylor to give us a presentation of his thoughts for tonight?
Well, thank you very much, Raymond. It's really good to be here, and I'd like to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador, very much for introducing this evening, and indeed for answering the many questions I'm sure he's going to have. The relationship between the United Kingdom and Italy has always been a strong one, and it was really with a certain amount of horror and anxiety that British television viewers learnt the news about the breakout of COVID-19 in northern Italy. At the time, I think, in fairness, it was a natural reaction, a very British reaction, to think, oh, well, that sort of thing wouldn't happen here. But of course it did. And one of the things we've been able to do is to learn how important it is to try and make sure that your health service is not overwhelmed by such infections. And indeed, a lot of the early effort was both in Italy and here in preserving a health service successfully in both cases, I might say, and containing the disease remarkably well in Italy. Of course, the geography of Italy and the geography of the United Kingdom are not dissimilar. But what was slightly difficult for the Italian government to cope with was the original source of infection. And indeed, I'd be really interested to know whether there is any indication that perhaps there was a degree of infection in Italy before people became aware of it. I've read all sorts of false news, perhaps, about such things, but it certainly is of interest, I think, to find how it made the disease made the leap from China to Italy, and the great devastation it caused to the Italian people and the Italian economy. I have a very good friend who's in the diplomatic service, not the British diplomatic service, it turns out, who lives who serves in Rome. And she was saying how remarkably disciplined the Italian people had been over the lockdown. And in fact, the lockdown, I believe, in Italy was a great triumph of administration. And whilst you mentioned that one of the things that Italy wants to look at is ways of making the administration more efficient and more responsive, I suspect that in the UK too, there's a sort of feeling that perhaps we need to be able to do the same. Indeed, a lot of what you were talking about, I found myself saying your experience was much like ours here in the UK, and of course you shared it with us. You were here rather than in Italy, but you know that this country has not had a happy pandemic. It's been a difficult time. The economic consequences are huge, and it's going to take us a great deal to recover the situation, and much effort is being made to that effect, and we can still learn from each other. I felt that the 4 Ps that you were talking about, which were going to be the key for the G20 brief of people, prosperity, the planet, and public health, were all things which I think are really very much at the heart of our recovery policy in the Conservative government, and lie the roots of what the Prime Minister is trying to achieve here. And I'm sure there will be little discord between us in the G7 and the G20 chairmanships that the 2 countries will be sharing, just as there weren't difficulties when we had that COP26 meeting very early on in this year, very much as a prelude to the traumatic events that have happened since. I think that the two countries have a lot to build by way of trade with each other. Bilateral trade agreement between the two countries, I hope, will be reinforced by an agreement with the EU over trade policy. I believe that it's really very important to try and achieve a good agreement for the future of our country within a proper relationship with our European neighbours. And so it's my own view that that will be an important thing, and I hope that the Italian government will be keen to see that happen too. So I will just thank you very much personally for being with us this evening and giving us all the opportunity of talking to you and asking you questions for the future. I'm very grateful. We must look forward. There are huge opportunities and an agenda in which the Italian government and the UK government have much in common.